Hey guys, what's up? This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today I'm here with my good buddy, Dr. Michael Moeller. And he's going to be talking with us about Christianity, about psychedelics, about Western medicine. And thank you for coming back and joining us again and gracing us with your presence.
Hey, I'm always, it's always a pleasure to talk about healing, health, logos, and I always enjoy our conversation. So we're already 45 minutes into a good deep convo. So let's just keep it rolling, man.
Absolutely. Sorry you guys couldn't be there, but it has been good. We've hit on a lot of topics. But today, what I wanted for us to talk about was the general phenomenon. I think, of course, myself, Michael, and a lot of you guys have reached out to me that are interested in the Church of the Eternal Logos. A lot of you guys that came over from Fractal Universe, there is a sort of phenomenon happening where people are returning back to Christianity. Logos rising is the common hashtag for that. And I just wanted to pose to Michael, was there a moment to get this started? Was there a moment where you started to recognize this transition back to Christianity? Because like myself, like a lot of the people at Fractal Universe, all about Graham Hancock, Alan Watts, Robert Anton Wilson, Terence McKenna, Timothy Leary, the whole occultism. You were in that paradigm along with all of us that are now moving out of it and seeing something totally different now.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty complex question. And I think there's a lot of things that we can go ahead and unfold out of that. But yeah, I think that with a lot of the recent political turmoil, and I would say kind of the attack on Logos, left a lot of people confused, right? With Trump, with the whole transgender movement, with the whole, it's just confusion. Everything's kind of in the upside down right now. And on my end, I've always just been a person that questions everything. And I think probably the censorship is really what kind of turned things on its head for me. And actually, Jordan Peterson, I know we both kind of have our own thoughts on that, but listening to him on the Joe Rogan Experience, he was the first person to really elaborate on some of these really complex issues and to bring them to light in an understandable way, like all these cliches. Mm-hmm. So to me, I think that was kind of a good icebreaker. And then I'm a small town farm boy, grew up in Southern Illinois on a farm, did my undergraduate in Carbondale, Illinois. And now I'm in San Diego. I have my doctorate in natural medicine. So I practice being a doctor, but I use natural, holistic, and integrative medicine. And in my opinion, which is more Logos. So to me, a lot of these, I was using the tools of Logos and not really understanding what that even meant. Mm-hmm. And when society and culture seemed to deconstruct that in front of us, it not only left me, but I think a lot of people out in the cold. And you're kind of, once you start turning everything on its head, it's like, what is what? You and I still kind of talk about this. I'm still figuring out which way is up. And the only way to get there is through the truth. And it's through these divine principles by which, we're trying to know God and trying to know the universe. And that's extremely important when you look into the realm of natural medicine. So to me, it's been a slow transition in and out of everything. I'm always one to try and gather more and more information. So like everyone else, man, I'm just trying to figure everything out here and trying to live what I would say is my most holy, complete, divine life, connect with God and be the best person I can be, make the world a better place, limit suffering. So getting there, man.
Absolutely. Now, for you, is there any particular moment where you remember the beginning of this transition, or like, is there a moment where you recognize that maybe Christianity has something that I wasn't aware of before?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I grew up Catholic, went to church 4 or 5 days a week, kind of depending on what season we were in, Catholic grade school. And with the education system that we're in, I really started questioning the Jesus thing very early on from a physical perspective, completely ignoring all of the psychological, philosophical perspectives that you and I talk a lot about now, the representation of what that means and navigating the world. So the Jesus thing kind of fell to the wayside. I started questioning everything in college. I found Alan Watts, Terence McKenna. I was kind of maybe a little bit atheistic, but even to the point at some time a little bit nihilistic. And then I found psychedelics. They really kind of woke me up in a variety of ways. But I still felt, I guess, kind of like, I don't want to say an emptiness, but just like a purposelessness. Like, I think that's one of the big problems with society now, the pale blue dot. We're just the speck in time. We're not significant. And I'm like, dude, I feel pretty significant, and not in an egotistical way. And actually on one of my DMT trips, the walk away message really was that be noble, for you're made of stars, be humble that you're made of dirt. Like, we are always in these contradictions. Like, we have the ability to create and do amazing things, and we can die from the smallest microbe. Right. So really
fallen yet made in the image of God.
Amen, man. 100%. And that's what religion teaches us. The Orthodox kind of view of Christianity, which again, we can talk about a lot of smoke and mirrors going on there. And seems like that's done purposefully. I think I told you before our last ayahuasca session, when I was outside kind of reflecting on things, and I was kind of tuning in and tapping on, and I was like, God, what is going on here? Like, I'm pretty confused about my orientation in the world. Like, what do the powers that be, or Satan or whatever, what does it want? And it's like, that's what it wants. It wants confusion. It wants us to turn on ourselves, and it wants us to deconstruct the one thing that can really save us, like truth. Yes. And that's what we've done with relativism. We've destroyed truth. And in the end, we're all lost now. And everyone has their own subjective truth. And we're all like, you have your truth, I have my truth. And no one knows how to do anything. We have no target.
It's the oppositional.
Got rid of sin.
It's the oppositional chaos to order. And order is logos. And so I totally agree with, confusion, chaos. These are tools of evil, of the devil, of Satan, however you want to frame that, of the fallen world. And we have now seen I argue generally the movement away from logos since the first schism of the Catholic Church, moving away from Orthodox theology and establishing the papacy. And then the papacy symbolically is the centralization of power, which then communism, socialism, all these man-made systems, they're always trying to centralize power. So one single individual, one man, can literally run a bureaucratic industry like a god. And so if evil exists, it's always going to centralize power, because that's the way evil can control institutions.
Yep. Amen, man. And I think that comes down from a health perspective of this, a free will, like getting away free will, determinism just makes absolutely no sense. Like, me as a doctor, if someone's coming to me to be healed, they have a choice. And, we can dive into the psychological stuff that really, Jesus was the greatest healer. You could literally touch him and heal people. What does that mean?
You could
that
touch
means
his cloak, right?
You come to him, you embrace his ways, you will be healed. Yes. Like the ultimate healing. And Jung kind of had an idea about that almost all disease states are some form of psychological disruption, and that they manifest outwards through that psychological disruption. And you could get into some really wonky new age stuff about like certain areas of the body. I think that there are logical reasons why those things happen. Like, you'll have people with eating disorders, and it's like they're not consuming the right stuff, that, the body image, all these things, their inward will reflect outward. And so to me, if a person's free to choose, and if they're not, and they're deterministic, it's like, what's the point of medicine? What's the point of all this stuff? And then those ideas become so hard to deconstruct, because we've just lost like common sense. And from practicing medicine, how do I reach to a person that believes in those things? And first I had to reflect on myself. I'm like, look, I can't even technically be a doctor saying those things, because then I would be in contradiction. Right. If you can't heal someone who's in a constant contradiction. I mean, that's to me a lot of what medicine is doing right now, whether that's insurance or most of westernized medicine. But
so we mentioned before this conversation about how you perceive Western medicine as being antagonistic or a dialectical opposition to logos. Can you explain a little bit? I mean, you're basically hinting at that within what you just said.
Yeah. So again, I'm a naturopathic doctor in the state of California. I'm licensed as a medical doctor. I can give out pharmaceutical drugs, but I also am very well versed in botanicals, like herbs, diet, lifestyle, all these things. Now, there's a time and place for everything. You're in a car accident, you break your leg, you need to have surgery and fix that up. But when we look at things like chronic disease states, like diabetes, type 2, it is 100% reversible. Type 2 diabetes is when you've had so much sugar basically throughout your life that you have a decrease in what's called your insulin sensitivity, meaning that the signal that tells sugar to go into the cell doesn't work anymore. Okay. Now, to me, it's absolutely asinine to use, basically you use something like a metformin, and there's lots of good research on it. But a lot of these things literally prevent your stomach from uptaking sugar. Like it's a downstream effect. Like you need to get to the, well, in naturopathic medicine, we talk about getting to the root of the problem, right? And so to me, it's like if you're in a car and you drive down a street with nails and you pop your tire, Western medicine like patches your tire. You come and see me, I'm like, stop driving down that street. We have to get at the root of the problem. And that's tough though. And so that, and to me, that's anti-logos. We're lying about the situation, saying, oh, it's fine, let's go ahead and do this.
Right.
And then as you see, like other things are symptoms. You live in a state of dis-ease, like dis-ease, things are going to manifest. And I also think with the way the system has been corrupted, we have the rise of insurance. Again, sometimes insurance is good, but a lot of it's lying. A lot of it's like, this procedure is worth $10,000. You know, you have to go back, like doctors and insurance companies have to lie to each other. This is a $10,000 procedure. Insurance is like, we'll give you 500. They're like, cool. Like, what is that? What is that really? Like, does that make any sense to anyone here? To me, when I look at that, I'm just like so confused how we got to this place. And again, this is a big kind of reflecting back on what the logos is. It's like, well, we're not logical. So yeah, maybe it does make sense. We're in the upside down.
Yep. Yeah. And, you know, when you mention how do we get to this place, this is something that I contemplate in regards to global politics, specifically American politics, just Western culture, you know, the whole global homo agenda. And this is all predicated on the perpetuation of sin. You know, it's normally never framed in this manner, but sin is any action that takes you away from logos, God's divine order, because it's never sinful to be in God's order. So we now look at all the candidates running for president, you know, and I'm not trying to idolize Trump in any manner whatsoever, but my point is just, it's clearly most self-evident within the Democratic Party, or, you know, the Labor Party in the UK, or however. It's just what they advocate for is now it's just full anti-logos, and it's it's all chaos. It's all chaos. You go to California, go to a major city, look at all the homelessness, look how dirty it is, look at all the hypocrisy, right? The Bible, this is a video I want to make in the future, but the Bible talks about the mortal sin of hypocrisy, because to say one thing and then live out the other, that's, you know, you are anti-logos. And the hypocrisy of the world right now. Look at the NBA in China, and LeBron James, so quick to criticize Trump, so quick to criticize traditional America, so quick to criticize anything American, and yet will not say a word on China, and then says that Daryl Morey is uneducated, a gentleman that graduated from MIT, who all he did was show support for people fighting for freedom in Hong Kong, dying and fighting for freedom. Our age. These are millennials that are fighting the fight.
Yeah.
You know, and
actually fighting a fight, not like sitting on the edge of a curb, like literally getting gassed and like getting out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fighting for independence.
This is the revolution, you know, the revolution before, you know, in you know, the 1770s, it was against the British Empire. Well, the revolution now is against China.
Yep.
And it's so sick to see how Google, Disney, Apple, the NBA, they have sold out for the dollar, because the size of the market in China, I mean, China is arguably 1/4 of the world. So if you get inside the market in China, it's endless profit, right? You have the ability for endless profit. And this is part of the moving all the manufacturing jobs to China to build up a middle class in China. So then the Chinese people can buy things, so that all these corporations can come in and make more money. And
it's all about chasing the dollar.
Greed, it's all mammon. It's all the 7 deadly sins.
Do you see the South Park episode?
Yes. Yeah.
It was pretty good, man.
Absolutely. And thank God, even, you know, it's so funny. Again, look at South Park and their criticism of traditional culture. You know, when they first started, right? The Christians were the ones that were upset with South Park. And now it's the progressives. Yeah. And it just shows you, one, the cultural momentum that's occurred, but also the writers of South Park being some principled in one way or another. You know, I may not agree with their worldviews, or think that maybe they perceive, what I would see as sinful behavior in a positive light. But at least in regards to free speech, free expression, these are traditional American values. At least they're principled. And so
Yep.
the hypocrisy, one of the things that I'm noticing then is there is a sort of emerging dialectic of anybody who's principled about anything versus the other people who are just hypocrites and will say anything for power or for, the opportunity in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just they're basically just smoke and mirrors. They don't really stand for anything, and that's kind of the problem. When you don't, we kind of talked about this before the podcast. Like when you're in your truth and when you're in your light and you know where you're going, you won't sell out to China.
Right.
I think it was Zach Galifianakis. Is that how do you say his last name?
Yeah,
Is that right?
Galifianakis.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't know if this is even true, but after The Hangover, I guess Nike wanted to sign him for some type of deal. And he said, "Oh, are you guys still like having those 6-year-olds make your tennis shoes?" And then I guess hung up on him, So I don't, maybe he's that truthful, but
Right.
and I've thought about that at times to, reflect on myself. Being a naturopathic doctor, I highly, highly advocate against high sugar diets, against McDonald's, against all this, this crap that they're feeding us. It's anti-logos. It's not real food.
Yes.
It's smoke and mirrors, people.
It's not real.
But again, I'm like, oh, Jesus, what if McDonald's was like, hey, Dr. Moeller, if you sponsor us, we'll give you $10 million. Like, I'm not making excuses. I do get it. I get the temptation. And this is like Jesus being tempted by Satan.
Yes.
And Jesus, he says, hey, you can have all this. All you got to do is bow to me.
In the world.
Yeah, man. And we're all, and no one's perfect. And I think one of the big thing that I have a big problem with that gets misconstrued a lot, and I'm lucky, I think, because the faith that I was raised on and the way that I learned about God, it's almost like I'm a natural apologetic. Just because when people are like, oh, well, God makes you feel guilty. I'm like, no, man, like God loves you. That's the number one rule is he loves you and wants you to flourish. He died for you. And people are like, oh, he's just judgmental guy that lives in the sky and wants to tear you down. I'm like, no, the thing is, like you said, we have sin like health. No one is going to eat a perfect diet 24/7. No one's going to sleep perfect 20. Like it's impossible. And it's not like, don't make an impossible judge to feel guilty, but it's just like to arise the human spirit. Like what is truly possible here? And so often we take the easy way out, whether it's drugs, whether it's even like having a tough conversation and standing up for it. You know what? I don't care what it is, whatever type of conflicts arise now, we don't even have conversations. Like you're saying, most people will say what needs to be said. So there's no conflict and then they get reelected or that people will like them. Well, I'm sorry. Like if you're going to stand up for logos, people in this world probably won't like you. Like exactly. end of conversation. Oof,
right. No, it's so true, man. It's so true. And you mentioned kind of the escape routes, and you even mentioned drugs as a sort of alternative, and that connects with something that has been important with our lives, and that is mind-altering substance, entheogens, psychedelics. And this has been, the last year has really caused me to question all this. You and I even went to an ayahuasca ceremony, and one, the culture, as we talked about briefly, but I also made a video talking about entheogenic esotericism on my channel. And that is my academic research. My academic research is trying to discuss psychedelic culture as a new religious movement, especially beginning in the 1960s. And then rooting that within the Western esoteric tradition of magic, which has been this continual progression away from logos towards this idea of becoming your own God, this idea of enlightenment, this idea of illumination. You mentioned Luciferianism and the root word Lucius and light and the light bringer. Even the Catholic telescope's called Lucifer. That's in Arizona. I wasn't aware of that. Jay Dyer, he mentioned that and I looked it up. It's like, oh my God. What does the Vatican have a telescope called Lucifer for? But anyways,
dude, it's literally, guys, it's right in front of us. Like all these lies, if you just open your eyes to see them, like when we talked about Hollywood, like it's made from a tree to cast a spell on you. Spelling words is just an S short of swords. It's like, guys, this stuff is right in front of you if you have the willingness just to open your eyes. But it's not easy. It is kind of like the bite of the apple. Like you can go on your way, people, and be an NPC and work your job or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like spiritual warfare out here.
It's like, I love the metaphor of biting of the apple, but it's like the opposite apple. It's
Yeah,
like because the apple of Eve, the reason she ate the apple is because Satan was tempting her to become like God, right?
Mhm.
Really, the whole paradigm, the whole religious system that I'm now in opposition against, this idea of individuals becoming their own gods, is right there in our narrative of Genesis and the Garden of Eden. And now that what you're talking about in terms of like being able to see, being awake, it's like biting the opposite apple, because now it's validating the fall. It's showing that we are in a fallen world.
Yep.
And one of the things I mentioned to you while we were talking, that I've been going to my alma mater, IUPY in Indianapolis, and as an alumni, I can use their library. So I've been using their resources to do research for my dissertation. And on campus there, they have a group for Christian apologetics. Now, not very many people go. It's for undergraduates. But I went and made sure that I could go and sit in on that. And I, let them have my thoughts. But yesterday, a gentleman who I really like, his name was Mark Eckel, Dr. Mark Eckel. He's a professor at IUPUI. He's a good Christian. He's totally on board. I was talking about presuppositions. I'm talking about the metaphysics of logic and logos. He understood all of it. He was totally on board. Everything I said, he said amen. But one of the things he mentioned about movies is that he wishes more people watched horror films. Now, why? Because his argument was horror films are the best way to create a Christian paradigm, because the fundamental of the Christian paradigm is we are in a fallen world and it's run by evil. And so when you watch a horror film, whether you're atheistic or whatever it is, you're entering a paradigm that's totally consistent with the Christian worldview. And so he was talking about how, I forget the gentleman's name, but whoever directed The Exorcism of Emily Rose, I guess he's an open Christian, and he only makes horror films. And so it was really interesting for him to talk about that and really open people's eyes to the presence of evil, because I think that is one of the stimulating factors that pushes you and I and all these people back towards Christianity, is that, especially if you go to California, you're starting to see inconsistencies that definitely aren't logos. You can't put your finger out. You don't have the theological vocabulary of Christianity to talk about it, but that's not right. And it's just this continual progression.
Yeah. And that's what's been interesting for me, at least, is trying to follow, and again, smoke and mirrors, because there's this whole like follow your heart. And I mean, from what I've read, most of the scriptures, and I'm not trying to be biased, a lot of times it's like the battle's in your mind. Like your heart has its own wants, and love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. But again, kind of all these smoke and mirrors, figuring out, okay, well, this feels good to me, but how does this align with the divine principles? And our generation, and I've heard this from Bishop Barron talking about how a lot of the Catholics in the last 50, 60 years were, very Rogerian, very much like infinite love. Everything's about love, but God rules with two hands, love and justice. And unfortunately, when we mess up, we have to pay the price of justice. We have to repent for our sins. You punch someone in the face, like you need to at least put an ice pack on it or something. Like it's necessarily like we are human beings and we have actual impacts in this world. And therefore, when we mess up, which again, someone who's very relativistic is like, there's no such thing as messing up. Well, yeah, but there's a reason to get to our goal, right? There's something that's more aligned with the divine principle and what limits suffering in the world. But yeah, it comes from this place of you enter the world of relativism. It's like, good luck getting out of there with any sense.
And the key word for me in that last little diatribe was justice, because justice is connected with an entire metaphysics.
Yep.
Right. Because it connects with ethics. It connects with epistemology. It connects with everything. So what is justice? And so you see, because we believe the world was spoken into existence, the playing ground, the battlefield is language itself. And this is something that Terence McKenna talked about. But we see then social justice, gender justice, animal justice, climate justice. It's a new definition of justice, because now justice is the acquiescing to the global homo agenda. This is what's justice now. It has nothing to do with truth, because they don't believe in truth.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with ethics, because they don't have a basis for ethics.
Yeah, there's
So
an individual truth for every line, which doesn't make sense. Like what is good for your liver is not going to be good for your brain and your heart always. Like you have to have a cohesive narrative of everything. And you're right. And this is just a symptom again of our society. You go to this person for, you go to a bank for your finances. You have an accountant for this. You have one doctor for this, one doctor for this. And again, in a naturopathic perspective, which I'm arguing for is very logos, is like, it all goes together. So you can't cheat yourself with a bad diet, because downstream, and I think in As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, again, one of my favorite books, he talks about how, you can spend all, like a rich guy who eats too much, you can spend all the money in the world you want on pills and stuff, but downstream effect is you're going to get fat and you're going to have all these negative things happen. So when we
which shows there's truth.
Yeah.
That's an objective reality.
There is a way that we affect reality 100%. So when we put something in the pipe, what comes out the other end? And I think one of the big problems with our generation is we have been, I'll say privileged. I don't like using that word in an individual context, but we've had a lot of things that my parents grew up really poor, like scrapping, like way harder than I had it. And their my grandparents even worse, Great Depression and, eating lettuce sandwiches and stuff. So but there's a gap between when we do something wrong and then we see the outcome effect. And at least for me, I have been a doubting Thomas. So if there's a rule set in place and you tell me A plus B equals C, I'm still going to put A into the equation and B into the equation to see C. And that you could say what you want about that. I'm sorry, I've made some sins. Lord, forgive me. But I in a world full of smoke and mirrors, I'm trying to figure out what is truth, what is justice, because we're fed all these lies.
Right.
And I think that's where people like you and I eventually come back and are like, look, these systems are broken. Like what you're saying here, like the diversity thing, all people are the same and yet they're different.
Yep.
It's like, okay, we need every color in this department because all people of the same color think the same way. So therefore,
except for white
diversity.
men.
Yeah, except for white men. We don't need them in there. Yeah. But it's just like, it doesn't make any sense, because we're not looking at this thing from a overall, and that's the thing, is we don't have an overall cohesive.
We don't have a logos to
us.
perceive it from.
Yes, 100%. Yep.
And that's why for me, Orthodox theology, and it's not that I'm a proponent of the Orthodox Church. I'm a proponent of the Orthodox theology.
Yes.
Because I guess maybe the Protestantism I was grown up with is this kind of questioning the skepticism regarding institutions, even though the mainline Protestantism has ecclesiastical structures, but it's the theology of the Logos, which is fully explicated in the first 1,000 years of the church in Orthodox theology, and it built upon the entire Greek philosophical system. And it's just so profound once you understand it, once you're able to perceive it. Earlier we were talking about John 14:6, where Jesus says, I am the truth, the way, and the light, and you can't get through the Father except through me. And I was talking about the multidimensionality to that one verse, and how it can mean a lot of different things, from the literal perspective, from the soteriological perspective about salvation and the dying for sins, but also from the Logos perspective, from all the logoi that compose the Logos. And the Logos is what incarnated as Jesus of Nazareth. It's logic, it's reason, it's truth, it's justice, it's honor, it's glory, right? Honoring your parents, honoring this natural structure and reality that God created. Like, it's through these in which you actually approach God, the Father, in which his two other persons of the Trinity emerged from. He begot the Son and preceded the Spirit. So it's been so difficult for me, and what prompted me at the beginning of this ramble that I was talking to you about is like psychedelics and Luciferianism, Illuminism, the whole emphasis on enlightenment, and how psychedelics have been so important as catalysts for you and I. And I'm sure a lot of other people watching this conversation that we're having, whether it be the LSD or the mushrooms or a DMT experience or the ayahuasca or a peyote or MDMA at a concert, it's the altering of your mind it's just beneficial for people to a degree because it breaks down whatever rigid paradigm you're in.
Yep.
However, the set and setting, right? This is the whole thing about the 60s, the set and setting, and this is why MK Ultra and psychedelics were used, is because you can program people. And so now what I'm seeing, you know, with my research, I doubt that I'll ever talk about this in my academic paper, but really the culture of the psychedelics from the counterculture, right? Because one of the things that you and I were talking about, this is what I'm kind of working through right now, is Jacques Derrida dramatology, and how he critiqued Western civilization as foul logocentric. This was his big problem. And so the Academy took his argument of foul logocentrism, and then basically it picked up his paradigm, his enterprise, and postmodernism, relativism, gender studies, multiculturalism, all this stuff is embedded within this idea that he put forth about how Western civilization privileges the understanding of masculine, the masculine structure. You know, masculine, it's not necessarily about men versus women. It's not this immense dialectic. You know, he may frame it that way, but then the logocentrism, you know, for him, he's always talking about the problem. You know, for him, this is a problem. Is he talks about the signifier and the signified, and how Western civilization is built on this idea of logos, and logos is the word. And so he even gets into the biblical theological understandings of what this word is as logos, and the logos or word. So for him, he's deconstructing written language. I know I'm getting pretty abstract right now, but he's deconstructing written language as a signifier of the signified. And so he attaches, because there's a theological presupposition that spoken language is tied to your being. Nothing can speak that's not existing. And this is part of the logos, right? Because logos is the first it's the begotten aspect of God. It's where being comes into existence itself. The world is created through the logos. So being is logos. And this was picked up by Martin Heidegger. This is something that I'm also working on, because he understood being as tied with logos. He had a problem with metaphysics. So even though he recognized logos and being are one and the same thing, he wanted to do away with all the Christian baggage of metaphysics that were tied to it. And then we can have a new understanding of being, which then, you know, that's in the 1920s. Then Derrida picks up. But he's talking about how the written language, which our Western civilization is built upon, is, especially from Plato forwards, right? So from Plato forward, you can see this emphasis on writing things down so then people can go back through and read it. He's talking about how that's really just a signifier of the signified, and the signified is the spoken word, and the spoken word's just a signifier of whatever you're really meaning. So therefore, we can never know what somebody's really meaning, because it's just this infinite regress of signification.
Yeah.
And so what he calls it is the presence. And so once you see how his deconstruction of language and the foul logocentrism Western civilization, now you can see why they don't believe in truth.
Yeah.
At the highest level, we're talking about academics, you know, we're talking about the highest level of thought.
And trust me, I've been down those. That's to me, that leads you to nihilism. Because you're right. Then it's like, the problem is then what's the point, right? Because you're like, I can never truly understand you. Well, to me, again, this is where you can kind of wrap in some of these other ideas. Like Watts has the talk about life's a dance. You know, it's not about getting to the one spot. So again, and this is what's so weird is to me, because that sounds like extra masculine. And I agree. Like, I think logos has a good balance of masculine and feminine. Like, we will never truly understand. We're fallen beings. God is beyond our understanding. So yeah, you're right. I won't ever truly even understand the God within you. Like, that's part of the game, folks. And you can wash it away if you want, but then what are you going to do? Literally, what are you going to do? Like, you can't trust anyone. You can't talk to anyone and try and understand them. Like, what's the point? Like, good luck living a pointless life. Like, you're not going to get anywhere. Like, really. And I think that's part of we sawed off the branch we're sitting on. Right. Really.
Absolutely. And that's why then when you start to do Christian apologetics, which I try to talk about on this channel in regards to presuppositions, you can deconstruct somebody's entire worldview who is an atheist, because they can't account for the things that they take for granted, because they're living off the remnants of a Christian worldview that is entirely coherent and based off logos.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can wash it away if you want, but then what do you have left? Nothing.
And then that's where you see somebody like Michel Foucault come into, and then he has
Yeah.
power of knowledge. So there is no such thing as truth. The
Yeah.
only thing that's real is power. So
Yeah.
then if that's the only thing that's real, you can get power by any means. So then hypocrisy, lying, ethics, and then it's just the whole modern world of degeneracy of the Western world particularly, but it's all the world. It just all makes sense now. It's all in opposition to logos.
And again, let's look at sin. Let's look downstream of that theology. Okay, everything's about power. How does that play out in the world? Pedophilia, lying, gun trades, drugs. Like, that's not a world anyone wants to live in. Okay.
Yes.
Like, literally, let's go back to telling the truth and saying the truth is the most important thing. If we all bow to the truth, no one gets lied to. No one gets ripped off. No one gets bitter and resentful. No one gets sexually abused, because we're all divine beings. I'll respect your boundaries and respect you who you are. It's like, let's look downstream and see, like, that's a thing that Peterson talks about. Like, if you can't understand someone and you're really trying to figure out what their intention is, it's like, well, let's see what happens. You say, hey, I love you, I want to take care of you, and yet, like, every time I turn my back, you throw a dagger in it. It's like, eventually you have to be like, that's not true. Like, I had to listen to the truth. My presuppositions of this other ideology is false. It didn't work out. You said you loved me, and I turned around, you stabbed me in the back. Like, and you can only live that way for so long before things fall apart. I think that was what Peterson's big argument against Harris was in truth. It's like, what is truth? It's like, well, let's look downstream. Does this give us what we say? All these other systems don't give us what they say. Our system, like our healthcare system, it's not healthcare. It's sick care. They wait till people are dead and dying, and then they throw you on pills to get more money from you, so the pharmaceutical company can make more money. And like the opiate crisis, that family, from my understanding, directly knew what they were doing when they put everyone on the opiates.
Oh, the Sackler family? Of course they did. Why do you think we're in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
You know, it's all tied together.
Yeah.
And so you're incredibly highlighting the problem with Western medicine. But to me, the full, as you recognize, so I don't mean to be just, addressing this to you, but the full realization is that everything is inverted. Everything.
Education
is indoctrination. Yeah. Medicine is to get you sick. Food is to make you fat.
Yeah.
Everything. What they call psychology now is literally to get you inverted. They're trying to say traditional masculinity is toxic. They're trying to say that the multiplicity of genders and child transgenderism is a natural phenomenon. This is every institution, academia. Academia is absolutely in opposition to truth. This is why you're seeing the bifurcation between the humanities and STEM, because even though the STEM is full of atheists, they're still working on the precipice of objective reality. You can't do engineering without it. You can't do physics without it. You can't even do any STEM without mathematics, and mathematics is built on the concept of logos.
Amen, man. And what's crazy, again, like, everything's so invertive, and the systems that we have in place are going to perpetuate whatever we're trying not to do, right? So from my perspective, the society and culture, especially in the Western world right now, is trying to become less masculine. In my opinion, we're becoming more masculine. More women are becoming more masculine. They're joining the workforce. We are working extra hard. We're thinking very straightforward and not, we're using one part of the brain. We're losing touch of the arts. We're not caring about the family. We're not caring about relationships. We're all about money. We're all about production. We're not about meaning. And that's, to me, is the feminine. The feminine is really about meaning. It's about, in Chinese, you have the yin and the yang. Yang's like hot, like get things done, like go at it. And the yin's more of like cool, calm, and like creative. Like, we need a balance of the chaos and the order, because if everything was just straight order, then I assume we would have no entropy and everything would just sit still. I don't know.
Well, from a theological perspective, the full crystallization of order would be heaven.
Yes.
Right? Because it doesn't change. So there is a sort of stagnation there, but it's perfection.
Yeah. Easy enough. And we'll never reach that, though, right?
Well, not in this world.
Maybe if we die.
Right.
Yeah. Not in this world.
And that's the point of this world. It is, it's so obvious we're in a fallen world, especially when I'm in Berkeley and I am seeing people advocating for pedophilia. Yeah. Advocating for this is a sexual orientation. I mean, how far have we fallen? It's because there's no standard. There's no standard whatsoever. And again, the game field is language. So whenever we're talking about progress, we're talking about progression away from truth.
Yep.
away from logos, away
Interesting.
from what built the greatest civilization in the world. Despite a lot of the problems with Western civilization, there's no doubt that it's produced the most fruit. There's no
Yeah.
doubt. This
Mhm.
isn't something that we have to be afraid or question. It's just so ridiculous how many Westerners, and it's so funny because you and I were kind of a part of it. If we rewinded 2 to 3 years ago, we would have been the people that whether consciously or subconsciously were contributing to the deconstruction
Mhm.
of the values that we now are absolutely in advocacy for.
Yeah, but I think, and maybe I'll speak for myself here.
Yeah.
In general, with a lot of things in life, I deconstruct them. Like I'm a doctor. I went in a
Mhm.
cadaver lab. I've sliced, like in a medical setting, I've sliced open bodies to literally understand the ins and out of it. When I was young, my dad was like, you should take apart your bike and put it together so you understand how it works. And I think that's part of all these different things. When you look at all the biblical stories and people have their fall away from God, I think that's kind of where we're at. Moses runs to the desert, Jonah
Mhm.
runs away from the whale. All these things I do think are necessary because, like Jacob, we're fighting with God. We're trying to understand him more. And this is all part of the process. But I do think some people, once it's completely deconstructed, just continue to deconstruct and deconstruct. And it was like, at least for me, when I pulled the thing apart and then I put it back together in a different way, or I tried to use other theologies to put its place. It's like I had a bike and then I put like block wheels on it. I'm like, oh, nihilism. I'm like, oh shit, this doesn't go anywhere. This doesn't work. And I think that, like we've talked about before, it's easier to trick someone than to tell them that they've been tricked.
Mhm.
And so for me, I had to be humble and be like, look, God, I don't know what's going on here. Can you lead me back in a direction towards you, towards light? And I still think that that's part of the spiritual warfare, the smoke and mirrors that are here that are designed to keep us in the darkness, like the sick care, the indoctrination. Like, again, who knows? Like we've talked about, you look at the earth, like the flat earth thing, like flat earth, 9/11 vaccines, all banned by YouTube. Why? Why? I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm on either side of the fence with any of those things. It doesn't need to come to that. We, number one, the freedom of speech. Like you said, we're based on the logos. It's the First Amendment. Literally, that's what we're about. So when you see a company comes in and says, no freedom of speech, like that should instantly throw up flags. And it's a tiptoe of totalitarianism. We've been slowly moving into this space for a long period of time. And I think eventually a lot of us, it's kind of like the boiling of the frog. Eventually I was like, oh, dang, this is hot.
This
like,
is
what's
hot.
going on?
Yeah, this
What's
water's
going on?
hot. I'm
And,
ready to get out.
Yeah, you and I, like, and I'm very, I was lucky to grow up in a small town, good sense of community. I have a great family there. And to go to Southern California to be like, this is what everyone wants to go and do.
Yeah.
You want to wake up every morning and sit in traffic for an hour listening to some rap garbage about like banging hoes, doing cocaine, shooting people up. You go to a job that you hate. You get hit with blue light all day with people you don't like. Then you get in traffic again to drive home, to be stressed, to worry about your finances, to eat your TV dinner or your in and out. Like that's what we're doing here. Literally,
that's
like
that's
people
the
like,
goal right now.
yeah, literally, I'm gonna move to San Francisco and get a job for Google and make $100,000 a year at 22. Okay, why? To live in a freaking box for $3,000 a month, to eat cardboard food and to not move?
Yep.
It gets me so fired up, man, because I see a lot of, I work with guys, men's health. So we've talked about this before, testosterone levels just slamming down, man, just dropping. And a lot of that, in my opinion, comes from the xenoestrogens. Okay. You eat soy, you eat these BPA that's in plastic water bottles. Those bind to the estrogen receptors in your brain and basically shut down the body's hormonal production. Okay. So we have this demasculinization, like it's in the research, like just go and look at testosterone levels from the 80s and the 90s. Like testosterone is plummeting. And not only that, but we have a huge rise of ED. Like, why is porn free?
Yep.
Nothing is free in this world, but for some reason, porn is free. That should throw up a flag for you right there. And I see it all the time. Guys have porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Okay. They can't get up and get going because of they're watching porn all the time. So again, wake up call. You're like, oh, okay, I'm going to jump on my phone. Like all these things, we have to pay for it one way or another. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yep.
And to me, anytime something's free, or just question things, the ability to question things. There's a reason God gave us a brain to figure things out, and you apply the template of the logos over it. And if it doesn't match up, like try and step back. I'm not saying it's easy, whether it's drugs, it's bad, relationships, food, whatever it is, it's tough. Like, again, spiritual warfare, people, but we have to wake up and see what's going on here and use our free will to get out of it. Fight for your souls.
So related to what you're talking about with masculinity and all this stuff, one of the things I thought was really interesting is in what, I forget which epistle it is, but Paul says that Christians are to eat meat, and anybody who comes and claims that eating meat is wrong is of the devil. I mean, he literally says this in one of the epistles. And now look at what's being pushed right now, this vegetarianism. And because it's totally tied, just like you're talking about with soy and the estrogen that's in these grains and these foods, it's all to feminize men, because it is the masculine principle that protects. And this is why we call God the Father. You see, it is the masculine principle. Exactly. So it's just, it's so obvious now. And one of the interesting things, I had a conversation with a gentleman on Instagram. He DM'd me, and he's going to recognize who he is. So if you're watching this podcast, shout out to you. But he was asking me about 2012, McKenna, the time wave, the Mayan calendar, other prophecies about 2012. And he just kind of, half chalantly just asked me what I thought about 2012. And he was hinting at this idea that maybe something really did happen in history. It wasn't the end of the world, but something changed. And I'm not saying I have any definitive opinion on this, but I do think it's really interesting to start to think about what is happening right now. The movement of all these men moving back to Christianity. It seems like evil in the world is becoming more apparent. The veil that hid everything is now falling away, and we're able to see Oz behind the curtain. And maybe this is a shift in 2012. Maybe since 2000, and I'm not seriously saying this, but it's something interesting to think about.
No.
Is since 2012, you can see how history has been working, and how it seems like maybe this is just a hypothesis, but maybe this is like this shift, and I'm not astrological, so I'm not talking about the age of Aquarius or anything like that, but I'm talking about logos rising, really. I mean, this is really what I'm talking about, is the apprehension of divine order, and then the installation of that order into the world, actually acting on it. And it seems like that is what's happening. It seems like, as you know, I'm not the biggest Jordan Peterson fan, but even that's what he was contributing. He was giving, clean up your room, bucko. Yeah. He was kind of contributing to this, this realigning of order and logos, even though he's not Christian. I have big problems with the way that he talks about Christianity, but it does seem like we're entering into a phase of history, and Donald Trump somehow is tied to this. I'm not even sure. I think whether, E. Michael Jones believes that he may be the kind of catalyst to bring down the American empire globally. That might be it. That's an interesting thought. Certainly he's contributing to the evil of Israel, and that whole rat's nest in the Middle East. But he's also riding on this sort of new awareness of the American people and how essentially institutions have fallen. Institutions have absolutely fallen. And it's almost thankful in another way, just the way that history works, that so many people were Protestant because of their reluctancy to kind of fall with institutions and always, or just being skeptical of institutions and of themselves, because it's like this ingrained American trait that is tied to the theology of Protestantism because of their relationship to the Catholic Church. Compare that then to where the Catholic Church is dominant in South and Central America, and look at the horrors that are there, and look what the Vatican does nothing about. Vatican does nothing about any of that stuff. It only contributes to it. And so now we're seeing the Amazon Synod, and we're seeing it's in, we brought this up. This is a topic we were discussing before the podcast started, was the Amazonian Synod, and how really what we're seeing now is the dissolution of the Roman Catholic Church and the beginning of the one world religion, which is, at least from the Amazon Synod, is a sort of shamanic paganism. And as you and I 2 or 3 years ago, big fans of Terence McKenna and the Archaic Revival and psychedelics and all this, it's like, wow, now we are seeing how the paganism, the shamanism, the relativism, the opposition to logos. I mean, and that's why they want to revert history. They want to
Yep.
take history back to the primitive state, because that's where then they can have full control. And I'm talking about global elites, the oligarchy, however you want to understand this, the globalist. I don't care what phrase you use, but it's just so interesting that now we're basically seeing the Roman Catholic Church, who, in my opinion, centralized power so that they could reclaim land in Western Europe, and therefore overpower the Eastern Orthodox faith, which is the original theology. And we're just seeing this perpetual progression, like a dominoes in Western history, now to the point where it's all falling apart. And it's going to be Christ, it's going to be Logos, it's going to be Christianity that saves us, if there's anything to save. I mean, of course, our souls can be saved, but I'm talking in terms of like culture, in terms of civilization.
I mean, the Logos is going to win.
It always will. It can't be defeated.
Yeah. And so, and really kind of what happened is that it seemed like the Pope kind of endorsed all these shamanic cultures, right? Is what you're hitting at. And when we look at that, the problem is then there are no rules. It's like, what is this even a religion anymore? It's kind of like with genders. If there's no like boxes and it's just here, like that's not genders anymore. I don't know what that is. It's just bleh. The same thing with the religion. It's like, okay, are you going to church and taking the Eucharist? Or are you taking ayahuasca? Like you need to kind of pick and choose. And I think a lot of people have this problem with religion in general. They think that the religions are all basically the same, right? Where like in principle, it's all about love, and principle, it's all about this. And it's kind of the same way with religion. It's like, there are a lot of things like rituals. You did a video just about like kind of like what makes a religion. There's a lot of things that overlay and I don't know. And maybe you'll have your own opinion about this with psychedelics. I think, at least in my experience, that like breath work, like these different rituals, they can be used for benefit. But like you're saying, Operation MK Ultra, they can be used to brains to indoctrinate you as well. So the setting is super important. And what's your intention? I've had that experience on different psychedelics, being like, okay, this doesn't feel good. Like, whether it's an entity or whatever that even means, like a feeling that comes upon me that doesn't feel well. But there's been other times where I felt like I connected to some type of higher power. I came out with a purpose. I came out with a realization, and then I went forward and did work in a certain area that was invigorating to me. So that felt pretty Logos to me. But again, at the end of the day, a lot of these different things, I think it's going to come down to, would it be possible? Like the St. Domingo, isn't that the Catholic Church that uses ayahuasca?
Santo Domingo.
Yeah. So I don't know, but what's your opinion on that? I mean, is that anti-Logos to be using ayahuasca in the church? If they're using Gregorian chanting and they're praying to Jesus, I mean.
Well, this is where I'm struggling with in my own life, and in regards to any mind-altering substance, because a tenet within Christianity is sobriety, and this comes from Stoicism. And Stoicism, because the whole idea, they were worshiping the Logos as well, is that the way to worship the Logos is to always be at your most logical state of mind.
Yep.
So there is this kind of innate sobriety within Christianity. So I question my own use of cannabis. I question psychedelic. I just question everything. Alcohol. I mean, how much caffeine do I intake? Because really, there's no distinction between these things. Once you really go down the path, where are you going to draw the line?
Even there's regular herbs like ashwagandha, licorice, like salt in your food, pepper in your food does things to your body. So it's a gray line. It really is,
It's so like the psychedelics then, because they have been so monumental in my own life. And so for me, like the first question I posed for you, when did you notice when did you notice moving back to Christianity? When did it become official or anything? For me, I was slowly moving back towards Christianity once I started to dive into, I moved to Berkeley, and then I came across the work of Jerry Brown. I did a podcast with him over on Fractal Universe channel. He wrote the Psychedelic Gospels. This, at the time, I didn't understand the context of all this stuff. I just saw all these frescoes with apparent mushroom symbolism. And now I'm like, oh, wow, this is the hidden history of Christianity. This is it. Now, side note, but now I understand, well, that was the Cathars. This was a heretical group of Christianity that was started to propagate these ideas within Christianity, within Europe, who had a very Gnostic understanding. And then Gnosticism, this immense dualism. So the Gnosticism is even rooted within now what we're considering the progressivism. Transhumanism is Gnosticism. The exploration of space is Gnosticism. These are Gnostic impulses within our society. So now I'm just looking, and it's like, do you need psychedelics if you have the truth?
No.
But at the same time, psychedelics have been so monumental in me being able to perceive my own patterns and habits that need to be corrected. It opened my mind in so many positive ways. Of course, I see how the setting, and that's what I mean about the psychedelic culture, is it seems like a lot of these young people who maybe aren't as philosophically or intellectually sophisticated, they take these substances, and because of the value system of progressive society, that then colors their revelations. You see, that is the setting. The setting isn't just that you're at your buddy's house. The setting is that you have two people there that think they're non-binary. And so then, the whole experience then is colored by these value systems, which are really in opposition to logos, opposition to God's divine order. And therefore, it's like this tumbleweed that's just been moving from the 60s forward. And now I see how I was totally part of that tumbleweed. Somehow I fell out of that tumbleweed. That tumbleweed's still moving, yet the psychedelic experiences I had allowed me to be who I am right now. And even when we did our ayahuasca ceremony, what was the realization for me? Well, was to build this YouTube channel. The realization for me is, I wanted to know, how am I going to make money? I wanted to know, how am I going to get a business going? This is what I went to. It's very pragmatic, worldly desires when we go to this retreat. I didn't get any of those answers. The answers that I got is that it's time to build. And what connected with me was all these symbolism, these biblical narratives, and then the archetype of Christ as a carpenter. And as opposed to, then I see the whole academic tradition of deconstruction. They're always deconstructing, and yet my Savior constructs.
Yeah.
And so it just put me in this weird place. How do I understand these things? Because they're positive, just like the ayahuasca ceremony. I had a positive experience, yet the ayahuasca ceremony is replete with these subtle values that I'm totally in opposition to.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's like a gun, dude. You can use a gun to kill someone, or you can use a gun to protect someone. I really do think it's a tool.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, you went into it with a certain expectation. And that's kind of been one of my realizations where, people are like, how many people have said they haven't seen the machine elves? And it's like, well, I took this and I didn't see the machine. It's like, well, and again, it's like different cultures, when they use psychedelics, experience different things. There's certain archetypes that I feel are there, and you can tap into a negative archetype. So if you go into that experience, I've heard people in the sharing circles say some things and I'm like, man, that was super demonic. It's like, oh, I am God or whatever. I'm like, whoa, okay. I mean, whatever, dude. It's like, but if I walked away with something beneficial, it's the same use of speech. I mean, I think that in your experience, it seems like they were definitely catalysts to lead you in the right way. For me, I think I came to ayahuasca because I wanted a spiritual experience that wasn't metaphysical. Like I wanted a spiritual experience that was like objective. And I had very interesting things that happened, which that I would say were spiritual. Like I think I told you, there were just like little nuances, things that in my experience lined up outside with other people. It just like, there were too many synchronicities. I'm like, okay, there's definitely something to this. So maybe it was a way to kind of bring me back, or, it's a rabbit hole. God has a plan for all of us. I don't know if it's necessarily our job to understand that and, judge other people. But I think in our case, I don't beat myself up for doing those things. And I still tell people when they ask me, hey, I'm thinking, I had someone on Instagram contact me who wanted to go to Peru. And said, hey, I'm interested in doing this. I basically said, does it call to you? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, it's not for the faint of heart, but if you feel like going and doing it, like, what else are you going to do? Sit around your whole life and not do it? Like, I do think God put certain things in our hearts to go and explore. And for some reason, I don't really know why.
Yeah, whether they're lessons or stepping stones or something, it could even be in opposition to logos, but the experience will always bring you back towards truth.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's like, you know, you look at Job, it's like, who knows? I actually do like the Alan Watts story about the Chinese farmer.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
for long story short, for everyone out there, it's just a story about like, there's a farmer. He has some horses coming to the farm, and everyone's like, oh, great, you got new horses, like wild horses come in. And he's like, maybe. The next day, his son breaks his arm falling off one of the horses trying to break it in. Everyone's like, that's a tragedy. He's like, maybe. Then the army recruiter comes the next day. His son can't go to the military. Everyone's like, oh, that's such a great thing. And they're like, maybe. So it's just really one of these things. I think the best thing we can do is follow love, logic, justice, and trying to live into God's plan. But like, you know, man, you look at Jonah, you look at Job, you look at Paul, like these people are they're all murdered, man, you know, murdered or tested in ways that are uncomprehendable. So at the end of the day, we all have to pick up our cross and just go at it. And, you know, I don't think there's anything worth doing more than that. What else are you going to do? Chase money and sit in traffic all day? Like, that ain't going to get you
Yeah.
anywhere. That's not good for your soul. Like, literally, like living for this world. That's, and again, it's a contradiction. You're not like, you're getting fat. You're not liking your job. You're not getting around. You don't like anyone that you work with. It just all lines up when you go in the opposite direction, guys. And we're going in the wrong direction for a long time here. And it's time to switch it around. And again, to support people. Like when you, the hardest part about me for a lot of this is just like when in undergraduate medical school, I'm always the first person to speak up. I'm usually the first person or the last person to call bullshit. You know, if I'm like, hey, I don't believe that, or I'll like defend it. I consider myself a weight in most conversations. So, but again, at the end of the day, like, who really knows? We follow the divine order, and at the end of the day, I pray that God leads me in the right direction and forgiveness for anything that I do wrong. And I'll continue to strive in the direction that I'm just here trying to make the world a better place. And I think if people can just say prayers like that and get into that spot, it's like, what bad thing comes from that, really, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great point. And one of the things that I did want to finish before we move on to the next topic about me coming back to Christianity was, again, it was an LSD experience. I had taken an Eastern Orthodox class. This was a semester before I really converted to Christianity as a devout apologetic practice. But I took an Eastern Orthodox course, and that's when I really got exposed to reading theology, Eastern Orthodox theology, and this idea of logos in a very serious way. And then I had an LSD experience where it seemed like all what we're talking about, it all lined up. And I could see then how analytic philosophy, how the development of the brain, it's all tied to language, it's all tied to logos. And then it just, all these things started to work. I started to see the patterns, the archetypes, the symbols. So then it's like, oh, now I can approach Christianity in a semiotic level. I don't have to believe anything, but I can look, just like I mentioned about Christ and the Carpenter. Now,
Yep.
I'm way beyond that now because there's just so much truth in all this stuff that it's not psychological. This is why I have a problem with just Jordan Peterson. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just psychological. It's not just symbolic. It's not just archetypal. That's just one layer of an infinite layered cake of meaning that we call God, which is a Trinitarian deity. And the second person is the Logos. And it's through the Logos in which we can understand the one in which the other, the second and the third person emanated from. And it's just been so meaningful. It's like, it's been really interesting because I've done all the options. I've gone to China. I studied Taoism. I did the Buddhism thing. I studied the martial arts, did the shamanism thing, got into Gnosticism. And it's like, nothing beats taking responsibility and accountability for everything you do and aligning that with the Eastern Orthodox understanding of logos. Mm-hmm. And doing that, there's just like nothing that really beats it. And as you mentioned, when you get into the psychedelics, synchronicities really start to come out of the woodwork. And to me, that's just all part of God's providence, because I feel like I'm seeing a lot of the same synchronicities now that I'm not in that same milieu and habits. I'm still seeing all the synchronicities, and it's just
logos.
It's like God's providence. It's like you're always being led by the Spirit if what you're pursuing is truth. Right. And so when I was critiquing Christianity, I was aware of the solar symbolisms and the motifs related to Apollo and Mithra and all this stuff. And therefore I had like a little current of truth that then pushed me. I could critique Christianity and it helped me push, but it's like, it's still pursuing truth. It brought me full circle all the way back, because this is the truth. And therefore Christian society, that's why we allow free speech. And that's why you can criticize and blaspheme Jesus, because it's going to stand the test of time. It is the truth. You can't destroy it. And I just wanted to say that.
Amen, brother. I 100% agree. And it's very synchronicity from my standpoint now is very logos. Like it makes sense. Like you're like, oh, I met this person at the right time, at the right place. And it's like, well, you were doing the right thing. They were doing the right thing. So you lined up. Like that's literally pragmatic. It's logical when you really think about it.
Right. Right. And it's so beautiful because, again, through logic and through you living your life a certain way. And this is, again, Eastern Orthodoxy talks about reading scripture and understanding the mystery of the Gospels or of biblical text can only be apprehended by somebody who's living their life in accordance to logos. So you have to first live your life the right way. So then when truth is presented in front of you, you can actually see it.
Yep.
Because if you're living in falsehood, you can't see the truth.
Yep. It's like someone that's lying to themselves. They're sitting there and they're deceiving themselves. Oh, people like me. I like my job, whatever it is. Like, and these lies, again, they all internalize and then they lead you to lifestyle choices that lead you into disease. It's not logos.
So one of the things I want to ask you, if you wanted to get into maybe briefly your phenomenological experience at our ayahuasca ceremony, regarding to fear is a liar.
Yeah.
Because I sent you a song by, it was Hillsong?
Zach Williams.
It was,
right?
It's called Not Today, like Not Today, Satan. It's one of their songs. It's called Not Today. But in it, I was blown away because it was like a week after we came back. She sings the exact same phrase that I heard you repeating all night long in your experience. So could you just talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have very interesting experiences when I'm on mind-altering substances. And a lot of times, which is weird because it's logos. In my mind, you remember that whole night, I'm like, fear's a liar, fear's a liar, fear's a liar. Fear, and like, that's what it's, it was really like an affirmation of just saying it over and over again. And one of my big realizations was a lot like Patrick, I was trying to figure out my path forward in life. What am I doing? What's my purpose? And maybe some people out there can empathize with me that often I've stopped myself before I started. Oh, but what if this happens? You're fearful of something. And then I thought, like, literally percentage wise, I reflected back and I'm like, man, most of the time the stuff that I've thought didn't come true. It's literally like a lie. And, and that's kind of when you look at a lot of the Bible verses and living with anxiety, like do not fear for tomorrow. Like at the end of the day, it's like, I have a mission. There's nothing else more important to that. What's the point of having anxiety? And I reflected a lot on that. Like when you look at something like Lord of the Rings, there was one point where Frodo kind of turned back, but you look at someone like Aragorn. I don't know what your opinion is, but to me, very logos. King Leonidas, you did a perfect example of that. It's like, that's their purpose. Leonidas is like, I'm going here and I'm going to prove my point and I'm going to die. Nothing is more important than that. And when you get into that space, like you look at all the greatest people who've ever existed, they get in that space and they dominate because they're on a mission from God. Literally, like their purpose transcends earth. It doesn't matter how much pain you put them in. It doesn't matter how much money they need. It doesn't matter where they're at in their life. Like that purpose takes over. They're going to accomplish that, or they die trying. And it doesn't matter. And those people, it's kind of like Tony Robbins says, you want to take the island, you burn the boats. And for like Aragorn, where was he going to go? Like, what else was he going to do? Leonidas, what is he going to do? Go back to Sparta and just wait to become slaves? And I think that for me, that was a big realization in my experience. Is like, once you devote your life to something, especially in the Christian sense, it's like nothing else matters. Like, I'm here to be the best person that I can be and follow the rules and help people out. And it's like, past that, nothing else really matters, man. Like, just go and do that. And I'm like, well, what if I can't do this? It's like, that doesn't matter. That's fear. Like, doesn't just go out and do your thing, dude. And so, very synchronistic, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the psychedelic experience that brought that. To me, the psychedelic experience really helps me sit down and meditate for 3 or 4 hours, which I could probably do on my own. But I was in a setting which, whenever more than was it 2? It's at 1, or gathered in my name, I will be there. So
2.
obviously
Yeah.
you and I were there together, and there was at least probably some semblance of that in the people around us, but enough that you and I created an environment where we could work on making ourselves better people. We talked afterwards, it was a form of a prayer and meditation.
Right.
So, I mean, there's definitely some benefits to be had from it, but is it from the psychedelics? Is it from the environment? Was it from, being in the same presence with you? And, that really gives relevance to, going to church and being in a prayer group and stuff. So,
Right. And when you say, is it the psychedelics? What I'm eager to say is it's absolutely not the psychedelics, because I'm realizing, but what I'm trying to highlight to other people is, again, the presupposition of the paradigm of enlightenment, of Luciferianism to a degree, however you want to understand that, is that then the enlightenment comes from the substance. It comes from the LSD. It comes from the mushroom. Terence McKenna's obsession with the mushroom. But again, if you're really doing a presuppositional analysis, well, if God is the mushroom, or if intelligence is the universe, right? Because a lot of what within the psychedelic culture, they'll talk about psychedelics, and then they always equate God to the universe. This is pantheism, but then the universe can't account for itself because it's a sentient. This is the logical fallacy. This is why you have to have a transcendent deity, and so you can see how, again, the presupposition of that the universe is God. It's easy to make the jump then, oh, the psychedelic told me this, therefore it must be true.
Yeah.
This is a transcendent object, right? That allows me insight, allows me enlightenment, allows me gnosis. Again, Gnosticism, secret knowledge.
That's what that was. And I've done ayahuasca more than a couple handfuls of times, and I've done other stuff, and that was kind of a big thing. Like, oh, does a plant? Some people are like, the plant talks to me. And again,
we were there. It's talking about the grandmother spirit. It's the grandmother spirit.
I'm like, I don't really. I kind of was on that train for a while, but now I'm like, I think it's more of whatever God was speaking through me, and I was allowing the channel to open up. So, and I can see though how people can, which is weird because they themselves say that everything they need is inside of them, but yet they go to a plant to, like, I'm God and I have the universe, and like, but yet I have to go to a plant to get the answers. I do think that they're catalysts though, but it's like, greater is he that was in me that is in the world. So it's like everything that I have is inside of me, or my connection to God is what's most important. And if I can catalyze that, if I can shut all the nonsense down, I think that's where the deep dive comes. I don't think you don't need to do psychedelics to do that.
Right.
There's so many different ways to go about that, getting that experience. So
no, absolutely. And this is one of the big shifts in my worldview, is because sorry for you guys if we're belaboring the entheogens and psychedelics in this podcast, but it's interesting. I think people think it's interesting, but
suck it up, people.
I just lost my train of thought.
Just talking about how we don't need psychedelics to talk to God.
Oh yeah. So one of the things that I've really turned the corner on is, again, because I was so consumed with Terence McKenna for a while that,
dude, you were mad when you didn't have the machine elves. I remember you're like, dude, I don't have no machine elves talking to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm like, I don't. I'm like, I don't know if
because I dove into that whole paradigm really hard. I tend to dive into things really hard. Like I throw my whole self into it.
Yeah.
So I did the whole psychedelic thing, and I did all the substances, and I did them at the high doses. And the idea that somehow there's like this radical distinction between people who have done it and people who haven't done it, that's really just dissolved for me. Because now, especially going to California, because again, California is so idealized, because I did a lot of this stuff before I went there. Of course, I did stuff while I was there, but once you get to California, you get to a culture that totally accepts this stuff and promotes it. And then you see how radically in opposition it is to what we believe to be true. I mean, again, what we're just saying is to logos. You realize, like, holy crap, like this stuff takes you to wherever you are as an individual. It's like, because of the integrity in which I was already living my life, even though I was embedded within the milieu of magic and occultism and psychedelics and Gnosticism and all this stuff, but the way I treated people, the way I didn't lie to people, the way that I lived my life, allowed deep insights to occur on those substances, to, where then you go around other people and it's like their insights, their worldview is totally in opposition. And you can see how again, it's all fueled by some type of vice, some type of sin, you know? And yeah, so the valor is, again, it's another form of valorization of matter, of this world. Right. And I think just generally, this is one of the problems with psychedelics.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think they put it, they make it to be God, literally, you know, pantheism, like, okay, this is a spirit that leads me in the way. I mean, it's like, at the end of the day, it's God that's going to be giving you all those things. My perspective.
And even shamanism itself, you talk about spirits, you know, you want to talk about, again, the valorization, the ideal, you know, the idealism associated with shamanism now. Again, and Terence McKenna, big proponent of this crap, but they're actually sorcerers, you know, because magic, magic is real. Magic is totally consistent with the Christian worldview. It's absolutely real. And so if you go to the Amazon, these shamans are sorcerers that are fighting other sorcerers in the jungle to claim their territory using the spirits that they're helpers with. So they're helping spirits. This, how is this not, from the Christian worldview, demonic?
Yeah.
Right. Because it's an alliance with spirits. We recognize that the Amazon's a spirit. We recognize that paganism, that there's created spirits, but that's the problem, is they are created, and they're actually, your humanity's at a higher ontological status than those spirits. So whenever you get in an alliance with those spirits, they get worldly things. This is the process of magic, and this is absolutely real. You can do this stuff, and this is what shamanism's doing. And so you can, even with Fishoff Chopra and Terence McKenna, or all these people that promote a shaman, you can see how it's, again, it's a reversion back to these presuppositions before we even got the logos. And it because it allows for the orgiastic experience. It allows for the scarification, right? Because it's not about the good, the true, and the beautiful. You know, and even though Terence McKenna at other times, he will talk about Platonic ideals like the good, the true, and the beautiful, and he'll make very poetic and wonderful articulations about art and the importance of art in society, which I totally agree with. I think he's spot on there. But shamanism itself is really in opposition, unless it's some type of Christian shaman, which is really hard to wrap your mind around. But it goes back to what prompted this whole conversation with Santo Domingo, or Santo Daime, I think is what it.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it's just really interesting. And so I think a good way to kind of root this conversation, no pun intended, is talking about how Christianity allows us to be rooted. You know, and one of the metaphors I told somebody in Berkeley, this was a Jewish woman, super progressive. She is into magic. She's into all this abstract art. And she asked me about, because I knew a lot about magic. She was in this class on Western esotericism. This is a graduate level course. I knew a lot about magic. I knew a lot about psychedelics. I knew a lot about all this stuff. And she asked me, "Oh, what's your spiritual practice? What do you like to do to access the divine?" And then I pulled out my Christian cross and I said, "Oh, well, I'm Christian." And it all has to do with the logos. And she goes, "What? You're Christian?" And she couldn't understand all this stuff. And she goes, "Why would you do that?" And she was bringing up all this other stuff. And I said, "Well, for me, the way that I perceive it, the way that I'm experiencing it, is when I was interested in magic or Buddhism or Taoism or paganism or shamanism or whatever you want to talk about, it was always like I was in the world and I'm moving and trying to get something, kind of like the Enlightenment, right? The Luciferian paradigm of reaching for the light, reaching for enlightenment, reaching for Gnosticism, the secret gnosis. And I was always just in this cycle. I would understand something, and then I'd realize that there's something greater, and just continue to move on. And it seems like now with logos theology, the world's moving, but I'm not. I'm rooted. I'm rooted in a paradigm. I'm rooted within a worldview. I'm rooted within a philosophical presuppositional paradigm that I just feel is true. For me, I know it to be true. And so there's this immense power I feel now by just being rooted, and being rooted within a theology that spans 2,000 years and has always been in opposition to the world. And the world has always been trying to destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
So can you just talk about that on your own experience being rooted within tradition?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can totally agree with you as far as it's a formula that works. It's like completed, like 1 + 1 is 2.
Right.
And when you go down these other rabbit holes, there's always something more. Okay, well, in order for me to, as far as Gnosticism or whatever it is, it's like transcending. That's the whole transhuman music movement. Like I have to become God. I have to meditate more. I have to open up more of my chakras. I have to raise my kundalini. I have to do all this. I have to do ayahuasca 20 more times. And like, yeah, I mean, I've met people who've done ayahuasca hundreds of times, and I met them, and wasn't like I was any more impressed with them as a human being. Like I have respect for all God's creatures, but I wasn't like, oh wow, like the shaman I sat with in Peru did it 5 times a week for 30 years, and he's like, kind of seems like a normal guy to me, no more, no less. So, and I think that that's part of the game, that society gets us off track. We're sitting in this floating space helplessly. We're just a speck in the universe in an infinite amount of time. There's no such thing as truth. And that formula just breaks down and leaves you basically, I think I understand why most people are NPCs, why they're sheep, because it's like, it's too much to comprehend once you go off the beaten path. Like if you're working with that formula, it makes sense that you just sit in the matrix because you don't know of anything outside of it. And then there's an infinite amount of chasing that if you want to pursue, I don't even know if they're what you would call that. Like when they pursue spirituality, it's like there is no truth. So therefore you can never get there, whatever that means. You'll never be somewhat connected to God. And I still feel like I get to know God, Logos every day, but it's like, at least I kind of have the formula or the understanding. And trust me, I go back and forth. There's times I'm like, why did you do this? And I, like where are you? Why can't I feel you? All those things. I still like, and I think that's actually part of the game personally, is that Jacob, you can briefly re-enlighten me about Israel, but wasn't that Jacob's name was changed to Israel, which means to wrestle with God?
Yes.
But then what is the Israel and the Egypt? They have Isis, Ra.
Israel, yeah, Isis, Ra'el. I don't know how legitimate that is. I learned about that from Jordan Maxwell.
Okay.
Some of you guys may be familiar with him. He's kind of like a esoteric scholar, or studies secret stuff. But that's where I got that.
But it doesn't also mean to like wrestle with God too?
Yeah, that's the biblical understanding is Jacob. Yeah.
And he lost his rib. And so like I one of the stories when I heard that, again, sorry, I heard that from Peterson, but that gave me a lot of like reassurance. Like, look, I'm not in this alone. I don't get it. There's times I question faith and I still wrestle. And but I know going the other direction is like not any, it's way worse. You know, and it's like it's just like chaos out there. And it's like, okay, at least I'm grounded in this. And I think that's partly me as a human, man. I just like exploring things. I'm rooted in the Logos theology, but I'm still gonna, I'll still looking around and figuring out stuff out there. So
yeah, for me, I don't feel like there's anything out there that I need. Though, my field is new religious movements. So I literally study religious trends, and it's just so interesting how that whole process has brought me back to the beginning, which is Logos. And that takes me back all the way to Heraclitus and the beginning of the Greek philosophical tradition. And so it's, I feel so much better about my life and future after the realization or coming back to Christianity, the anatheism of Christianity. And then it's not just coming, because I wouldn't be able to be where I'm at if it was all about, oh, I've exhausted all these options and the only options left is Christianity. I came back to it through logic and reason, through the philosophical. It was through reading theology at the highest level that brought me back. So now I could conceptualize Christianity holistically as really important and meaningful. And then slowly, like concentric circles, it's brought me all the way to the point where Jesus Christ is God, and he incarnated, and that is the Logos. And that moral message is unique, and it's absolutely the truth. And you don't really need anything beyond that, for me. And it's just been so great. It's just been, I just feel stronger. I feel stronger. I feel like more resilient in the world because I have something to stand on. This is something I was talking to the
form of
undergraduates.
God, dude.
I was talking to the
formative.
undergraduates at that apologetics course. Of course, you know, it's not a course, it's just a meeting, but they don't know what I know. They haven't read all the books. You know, they're 19, 20 years old. But I was trying to tell them, it's like, if you actually go down this rabbit hole and you start really learning theology and presuppositional arguments and paradigmatic claims, like, you are standing on a rock. You know, the Catholic Church tries to talk about Peter being the rock, you know, but I'm talking about Jesus Christ, the Logos, as being the rock. And once you really get into this stuff, there's nothing to be scared of. There's no God of the gaps that's going to come in and like destroy Logos theology for you, because it can't, because you're working at such a larger level. It's just, you just feel empowered, you know. And I just, the frustrating thing for me then is just building, and then the monotony of life and working towards your goals, and then the slowness in which those come to fruition. You know, for me, it's like my whole adult life has been this slow, methodical progression of reading, and trying to take in information and filter and understand what's to be true. And now I'm at this, you know, at this point in my life, and it's not exactly where I thought I'd be at 30 years old. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to go back or change anything about it, because I feel so thankful, as you were talking about people being stuck in the rat race in the matrix.
Yeah.
I feel so thankful that I can actually see the code of the matrix. I can read the code, you know, and because of that, I may not have the money. I may not be able to own a house right now. I may not have a new car, but
God, bro,
I'm a good conversation partner.
You got God, man. You know, like what Drake said, God's plan. It's God's plan, man. It's all happening the way it should. So
absolutely. Well, I think this is a great ending point for the podcast. How can people get a hold of you and what you're doing over on your channel?
Yeah, so I've had Patrick on my podcast twice now, and so we definitely deep dove into some interesting discussions. That's the Michael Moeller mentality. I have my own YouTube page, Dr. Michael Moeller, pretty easy to find. And, you know, if you're interested in men's health, drmichaelmoeller.com. Again, naturopathic doctor. Treat the cause, get people optimal Logos med. Maybe I'll make a new place and call it Logos Medicine, huh?
That's a great idea. I'm taking everything, you know, I put Logos on everything. I say it so much now, it's almost lost its meaning to people. My parents, it's funny though, my parents, you know, they don't know anything about this, but because of how much I'm infatuated with it, they've been able to see the world through this idea of Logos and theology. And it's just, I think it's, there's so much there. Like, you can talk about it at the really abstract theological philosophical level, or you can just bring it down and say, you know, Jesus Christ is the Logos and Logos is divine order. And then you know,
Easy
at a
enough,
real,
man.
at another level, you know, it's really easy to perceive the world from that way. But I think Logos medicine is a great idea. One of the things that I want to make a video on is talking about how this is a great opportunity for Christians to build Christian-based businesses.
Yep.
Because as Logos rises and more people become conscious, they want to go to somebody who they can trust as a person and, you know, support their business, support them financially.
Yep.
And
we're all getting there.
And so maybe in the future we can do, or maybe in a month or so, we can do another podcast just on men's health, you know, because I think testosterone is a really important thing. And I think the eating of meat, the working out, the being fit, trying to not, you know, masturbate and watch pornography, you know, that's been shown to decrease testosterone levels. All these things together, you know, it's something that we should just get out in the open and talk about with all your knowledge about testosterone and men's health.
Dude, you know me, I'm here. And I think if there's people listening in, you know, we should drop the idea about starting to do some of these live, man. Do some of them live. That way we can get some questions in. And if people are super interested in these things.
That's absolutely a great idea. We should do that. We should definitely do that in the near future. Start doing
like first
live
Wednesday
streams
of the month or something. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
You know me,
do a once a month live stream.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just open up to questions and talk, you know, because I would like to comment on culture more, not necessarily do videos focusing on culture, but it would be nice for us to hop on the microphones,
talk about China,
you know, turn on the live stream and talk about what's going on this month in the world, or, you know, culture generally, and talk about it from Logos. You approach it from medicine. I approach it from ideas, philosophy, theology. And I just, there's a lot of space to be covered there that I think
Yep.
would be really helpful to everybody.
I'm in, man. Drop a comment below. People, let us know. Again, Michael Moeller. Find me on YouTube. Go to my website if you want to work with me.
Yeah, website. What's your website?
drmichaelmoeller.com. DrMichaelMoeller.
Perfect. And what all of the social media platforms are you on?
Yeah, my Instagram, same thing. Dr. period Michael Moeller on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, so find me there. But it was a pleasure again being on the podcast. You know me, man. I'll be back here anytime.
Absolutely.
It's always a pleasure. Loving working with you, brother.
Absolutely, man. I love our conversation. So with that being said, we're going to end it. And as always, to everyone listening, God bless.
God bless, y'all.